Time. All right. Good morning, everybody. My name is Marian Matke. I am the Education Program Manager within Brigham Hospital and for the Division of General Internal Medicine. And I have the honor of being the administrator of the program in clinical effectiveness. And with me today are a few other members of our team. And this is, I think, coming up my 5th year of doing the program in clinical effectiveness, and it's actually going into its 40th year. So we are having an anniversary in 2026. And we are very grateful that you're all joining us this morning. And I'm going to turn it over to one of our co-directors, Dr. Heather Bear.
Great. Thanks, Marian. Hi, everybody. Nice to see you. Thanks for joining us on a Saturday morning, at least where I am, but I know it might be various times of the day, depending upon where you are. As Marian said, I'm one of the co-directors of the program in clinical effectiveness. I am an epidemiologist by training, so I'm an associate professor in the Department of Epidemiology at the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health, and I am an epidemiologist doing research at Brigham and Women's Hospital as well. Since Marian mentioned how long she had been involved, I have been involved in the program in clinical effectiveness in some way, shape, or form since 2007. So it has been a while. I've not been in this role necessarily as co-director, but I have been involved in the Introduction to Clinical Epidemiology course, which I'll talk about a little bit later in the session. So with that, I'm actually going to turn it over to one other colleague who's on with us today, Bill Gardner from the admissions office. So Bill, do you want to say hello?
Hey everyone, happy belated Halloween. My name is Bill Gardner. I'm an assistant director of admissions, and I work closely with the non-degree programs and the program in clinical effectiveness. So any application questions, whether it's degree or non-degree, you can send your questions my way. And thanks for joining us this morning.
Great. So Marian, I think it's back to me now, correct?
Yes, it's back to you.
And one thing that I'll mention, because I see a couple of their faces on right now, in particular, I see Louisa, Leandra, and Jesus right now. We do have some students who have done the PCE in the past and are now in the MPH program. We're going to hold and we're going to have them introduce themselves a little bit later in the session. So what we're going to do first is I'll go through sort of a presentation a little bit just to give you a little bit more information about the program in clinical effectiveness and a couple of degree programs that you can do either as part of it or later on if you go through the program. And then after that, I'm going to ask some of our current students who are on with us to introduce themselves, and then there'll be plenty of time after that for questions to us or to any of our students. So with that, I'm going to attempt to share my screen. So give me just a moment to do that. All right. And Marian, can you give me a thumbs up if the slides look okay? Great.
Thumbs up.
All right, everyone. So as I said, we'll talk today about the program in clinical effectiveness, which we call the PCE for short. I'll try to be explicit because I know abbreviations can get confusing sometimes, even among people who know these programs well. And then I'll also talk briefly about a couple of targeted degree programs that are related to that program. So first of all, here's our agenda. I'll talk just briefly in terms of a description and history of the PCE. I'll talk about the schedule and the specific courses within the program in clinical effectiveness. I'll talk about a couple targeted degree programs for students who are either currently doing the PCE or have already done it in the past. And then we'll go through some student and alumni introductions. As I mentioned, we, I think, have at least 3, if not 4 students on with us today. And then Marian will go through briefly just what the application process looks like. We should have plenty of time to answer questions as well. So with that, first of all, the description and history of the PCE. I'm sure all of you might have some sense of what the PCE is since you're on this session, but just to make sure that everybody's clear on what it is, the PCE is a 6-week summer program that's designed for physicians as well as other healthcare professionals who are seeking quantitative and analytic skills for clinical, health services, or population health research. We have this on a later slide as well, but just to point it out now, the dates for summer 2026 are already set. So it'll be July 6th through August 14th. So that's pretty much exactly 6 weeks. The PCE provides essential training in clinical epidemiology and biostatistics. And so there's a couple core courses that are part of the PCE that everybody takes. I'll be talking about those a little bit later. But it also provides training in other relevant areas for designing, implementing, and interpreting research. So we have some elective courses that you can choose from depending upon your interests. Again, I'll talk in a little bit more detail about those later in the session. Now, one thing to point out is that the PCE can be completed as a standalone certificate program, meaning just a 6-week program that you do during the summer, you're done, and then you get a certificate for completion. So it can be completed as just a 6-week standalone certificate program, or it can be completed as the beginning of a degree program. So some students apply simultaneously to the PCE and one of the degree programs that I'm going to be talking about later. We also have students who initially just start off as doing the standalone 6-week PCE program, and then later on decide that they want to actually apply to one of those degree programs, which is also completely fine. So a couple different options. One thing that I did want to point out, and we will come back to this again at the end when we talk about the application process, is that there are 2 different application deadlines depending upon whether you're applying to the PCE as the beginning of a degree program, so meaning whether you're simultaneously applying to the PCE plus one of the 2 degree programs that I'll talk about later, or whether you're just applying to the PCE as a standalone program. So if you are applying to the PCE as a degree applicant, meaning you want to do the PCE, but you also are applying simultaneously to either our Master of Public Health or a Master of Science, which I'll talk about later, then the application deadline is actually December 1st. So that's coming up fairly soon. So just wanted to make sure you were aware of that. If you are applying as a non-degree applicant, meaning just doing the 6-week program, then you have until February 15th as the application deadline. And as I said, I will remind you about these, or we will remind you about those deadlines at the end of the session. Just a bit about the history of the PCE, and Marian mentioned this already at the beginning. The PCE actually started in 1986. It was very small when it first started, and it's kind of ramped up since then. And it's been going through 2025, so total of 39 years at this point, and 2026 will be our 40th year. So kind of exciting. I have not been involved that entire time, as I mentioned, but for quite a bit of it. We've had over 4,000 students complete the program to date, and over 2,000 of those who've completed a degree. So one of the targeted degrees that I'll talk about later. The 2 targeted degree programs that I'll mention, I've already mentioned and we'll come back to, are the Master of Public Health, or MPH, in Clinical Effectiveness, and the Summer-Focused Masters of Science, or SM, in Epidemiology. So again, those are the 2 programs. We'll talk about those in more detail later in the session. And I just wanted to show you a bit of data. There was a survey that was done after the sort of at the 20th anniversary of the PCE. So it was done in 2006, 2007. It was actually published in a journal. So I've included a little bit sort of the abstract here from the publication. I'll just highlight a couple points because I think it speaks to some of the outcomes of our program. So this survey was performed, as I said, pretty much the 20-year anniversary by Mary Ellen Goldhammer, who was actually somebody who had done the MPH in clinical effectiveness. So she started this while she was in the program and then completed it afterwards. So at that point, they sent almost 1,500 emails and letters to people who had done the PCE in the past and asked them a number of questions about, their time in the program and then outcomes in the 20 years, or outcomes over the time since they had completed the program. 73% responded, which, if you know anything about surveys, that actually is a pretty high response rate. So I think that speaks to our graduates. And just to show you, there's a lot of more detail I could go into, but I don't want to spend too much time talking. But just to give you a few of the high-level outcomes from the survey, 43% of people who completed the PCE reported that they had received grant funding for the project that they developed as part of the Intro Epi course, the Introduction to Clinical Epidemiology course. So I'll talk about that course in a few minutes, but you do develop a research proposal as part of the course. And so 43% of people who completed the survey said they actually ended up receiving grant funding for that project. 64% indicated that they had at least one publication that had come out of that project, which is pretty exciting as well. And then in terms of the elective courses, 14% of people who completed the survey said they had received grant funding for a project that they developed as part of one of the elective courses in the PCE, and 30% indicated that they had published at least one paper based on a project they developed in an elective course. So I think those are pretty strong outcomes. One thing that I'll mention is that now that we're hitting the 40-year mark with the PCE in 2026, we're actually we're redoing this survey among everybody who's graduated from the program in the last 40 years. So I'm excited to see what the outcomes look like adding that additional data. Just to show you a little bit of demographic information, and we really probably would be nice to show this for all students who've ever done the PCE, but this is just showing a snapshot from students who did the PCE this past summer, so summer 2025. So we had a total of 110 students this past summer who came from a total of 14 countries. Of those students, 34 were simultaneously doing the MPH in clinical effectiveness, meaning they were doing the PCE as the beginning of that degree program. And there were 3 students who were doing the PCE as part of sort of the beginning of their Masters of Science in Epidemiology. All of the other students in the program were doing it just as the standalone non-degree certificate option. This word cloud is just illustrating kind of the different specialties that students reported. So as you can see, the ones that are larger indicate that there's more students who came from those specialties, but we had a pretty nice representation, I think, of people from a whole variety of different clinical specialties. And then this map is just showing, the locations just from this past year where students came from. But if we had done this for even probably the last 5 years or so, you would see it's a very global program. We have students who come from all over the world, which I think is one of the strengths of the program. All right, so that's just a little bit about, description and history of the program. Next, I'll talk in a little bit more detail about the schedule, so what the actual course schedule looks like, and give you a brief overview of some of the courses that we offer as part of the program in clinical effectiveness. So this grid is showing what the schedule looks like. And just to orient you a little bit, I told you at the beginning that the PCE is a total of 6 weeks. So basically 6 weeks full time. We in sort of the school, we actually think about that as kind of 2 halves of that 6 weeks. So summer 1 is the first 3 weeks of the program, and summer 2 is the second 3 weeks of the program. We have 2 what we call core courses. These are courses that are taken by everybody in the program in clinical effectiveness, so they are required. Those are Introduction to Clinical Epidemiology, EPI 208, which I am the lead instructor for, and Introductory Statistics for Medical Research, BST 206, which is taught by Dr. Brian Healy. So everybody takes those 2 courses together. They meet pretty much every day or every weekday for the entire summer, and those add up to 10 credits total. I know the credits probably don't mean that much to you now, but when I talk about the degree programs, this is helpful to orient you, I think, to see how much of the coursework for a degree program you do as part of the PCE. So basically, everybody is in these courses together, and they take up pretty much the entire morning from 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. Now, I should say there are some breaks in there, so it's not literally straight for 5 hours, but it's a pretty good chunk of the day. And we kind of share. So there are some days where epidemiology has sort of 2 sessions and biostat has 1. There are some days where biostat has 2 sessions, epidemiology has 1. But we do our best to really keep things organized. And these courses are very much integrated in the sense that we make sure that the material is well aligned. So what we're talking about in epi is relevant to what you're learning in biostat at the same time, and vice versa. Then in the afternoon, students get to choose from different elective courses, and I'll show you those on an upcoming slide. The elective courses are only 3 weeks each. So basically you take one elective in the first half of the summer, summer 1, and you take a different elective in the second half of the summer. And students are in, different elective courses depending upon their interests. The afternoon electives go from either 2 to 3:30 p.m., so the early part of the afternoon, or from 3:45 to 5:15 p.m., which is the later part. So again, in each half of the summer, you pick one elective course. And so basically each of the electives are 2.5 credits each. So no matter what, everybody ends up taking 15 credits total for the entire summer. And that's pretty much 1/3 of the Masters of Public Health, which is a 45 credit degree program. It's actually a little bit more than 1/3 of a Master of Science, which is a 42.5 credit program. So the reason I tell you this is, again, if you are doing the PCE as part of a degree program, or if you did the PCE and then later decided to apply to a PCE program, later decided to apply to a degree program, you get about 1/3 of the credits through this program. All right, so that's the overall schedule, but now I'll just talk in a little bit more detail about each of the courses. So I'll start off talking about EPI 208, Introduction to Clinical Epidemiology, which, as I said, is one of the core morning courses that all students take. I am the lead instructor of this course, but I have 3 other co-instructors. And as I'll talk about in a minute, we actually have a lot of other faculty who help with some aspects of the course as well. So, Intro to Clinical Epi, or EPI 208, covers principles and methods used in both traditional and clinical epidemiologic research. Excuse me. So, in the first half of the course, we cover a lot of the topics that you would learn in many intro epi courses. So, things like outcome measures, measures of association, all of the different study designs, ranging from clinical trials to cohort studies to case control studies to quasi experimental studies, et cetera. Um, Concepts of confounding, bias, effect modification. These are all concepts. Don't worry if you have not heard of these before, but if you have, these are concepts that you would learn in most introduction to epidemiology courses. But in the second half of the course, we really get into what I would consider more intermediate or advanced methods that you wouldn't necessarily be exposed to in other intro epi courses. So things like propensity scores, prediction models, target trial emulation. So we kind of cover more advanced topics that you might not hear in other intro epi classes, because we know that for some students, this is going to be the only epi course that they take. And so we really want you to have broad exposure to a lot of different topics and methods. The way that the course is structured is that we have most days of the course, we have lectures, and in the lectures, we have interactive activities built in. So, for example, I really like to use Poll Everywhere, which is a polling program, which is a way for students to kind of test out their knowledge. It's a good way for me to figure out if students are following along. We have some, kind of discussion questions that are embedded in a lot of lectures. And then we have on some days, we have small group workshops and presentations that are related to the research proposal that you'll be developing in the class. So I'll talk about that in a minute. We also have homework assignments that are at certain points in the course to, again, to sort of have you practice what you're learning in class. There's a quiz that happens roughly halfway through the class, et cetera. So there's a lot of different components of the class. I think it's pretty well balanced in terms of mixing lecture, but also with really getting to apply the skills that you're learning. Then a pretty big part of the course is spent on developing an individual project. So this is a project of your choice, meaning you get to choose the topic. And we actually send students information about this about 2 months before the summer starts, to actually have students start thinking about what idea they're going to bring, so that by the time you get to the course when it starts, you already have an idea and you can really work on fleshing out the methods as part of the course. So this is an individual project where you, again, are trying to apply the concepts that are being taught in class. So you really work on developing a proposal for a research study that you're hopefully planning to do in the near future. You don't actually conduct the project during the 6 weeks of the summer, because that would be pretty hard. But the idea is that you're writing a proposal for that, and hopefully maybe soon after the class ends, you'll actually go on to actually, develop and actually conduct and hopefully complete, analyze, and publish that project. This is written in the format of a mini grant proposal, so it's not as long as a real grant proposal would be, but it has all of the same sections essentially to really make it as real life as possible. As part of the project, as I mentioned briefly before, we have a lot of small group workshops where students are broken up into, say, a group of 3 or 4 students per one faculty member to brainstorm and workshop ideas. There are opportunity to sign up for individual office hours, one-on-one with a lot of faculty. You do a more formal presentation about halfway through the course, and then all of this culminates in a final paper that you write up at the end. Because of all of those individual components, we actually have about 60 faculty who are involved with helping with some aspects of the project to make sure that students can really get feedback along the way. And going back to the survey that I mentioned at the beginning, many students end up using this proposal to launch their research. So they go on to actually develop this and submit it for funding. Or even if they don't get funding, they're actually able to complete the project and publish it in the end. So I think it's a really useful project. Okay, I know I always talk longer about EPI 208 because I'm one of the instructors for that course. I'll talk briefly about the other courses as well. So the other morning core course that all students take is BST 206, Introductory Statistics for Medical Research, taught by Dr. Brian Healy. I'm sure that some of our current students who are on with us will talk about what a fantastic course this is and what a talented teacher Brian is, but I'll just tell you briefly about what the course covers. It covers general principles such as statistical testing and confidence intervals, how to present results visually using graphics or using summary statistics. In terms of specific tests, both parametric and non-parametric, two-sample, paired, ANOVA, time to event analysis, and even getting into regression in the second half of the course. So this is a pretty hefty number of topics that are covered as part of BST 206. But as I mentioned, Brian is a really skilled teacher and I think manages to cover this at a level that all students really, regardless of where you start off, are really able to learn a lot from the course. Brian also teaches the course, teaches sample size and power calculations, which are really important for a lot of things, but especially as you're developing your proposal for the EPI course, learning how to calculate your sample size and power is an important part of any research study. So that goes along nicely. And one thing to point out, we often get questions from students about what statistical software packages used, and Brian actually teaches all three of these packages. So SAS, Stata, or R. And so you'll get some brief introduction to all of them at the beginning, and then you can kind of decide which one you want to proceed with. So I think that's a really nice feature of the course as well. And I'll just emphasize, as I mentioned before, the biostat and EPI courses are really well integrated. So we try to make sure the topics are aligned. So what you're learning in EPI kind of matches up with what you're learning in biostat and vice versa. So those are the two, again, required morning courses for all students. But then, as I mentioned, all students get to choose one elective in the first half of the summer, which is summer 1, and then a second elective in the second half of the summer or summer 2. So this is based on last year's schedule, so 2025. We anticipate right now that the same electives will be offered next summer, but we will be confirming that soon. And there have been some years where we've added new electives as well. So, so this will be updated, but right now is a very good indication of what we'll be offering in 2026. So there's a medical informatics course, HPM 512, implementation research in health and healthcare, decision analysis and clinical research, and improvement by design, using the science of design, test and spread to innovate and improve healthcare. So four electives in summer 1, again, you choose one of those. And then in the second part of the summer, summer 2, currently there's 5 elective courses offered. So improvement in quality of healthcare, research with large databases, effectiveness research with longitudinal healthcare databases, machine learning in healthcare, and linear and longitudinal regression. So again, you choose one of those 5. I won't go into detailed descriptions of these right now, given time, but I know that we do have information about these on our website. So if you wanted to read more detail about any of these, you could certainly go to the website. Okay, so now I'm going to talk just really briefly about two targeted degree programs for students who either have done the PCE in the past or are starting a degree program at the same time. And then we'll get to the really fun part, which is when our students who've done the PCE will introduce themselves, and then we'll get into time for questions. So, so just to talk quickly about these two targeted degree programs, the first one that I'll talk about is the MPH in clinical effectiveness. And we call that the MPH CLE. I feel like the abbreviation doesn't exactly match, like really probably would be CE, but I think we're required to have 3-letter abbreviations for each MPH field of study. So, so ours is called the MPH in CLE. And actually all of the current students who are on with us now are in the MPH in clinical effectiveness, so they could certainly answer questions about this as well. I should say I'm also the field of study leader for the MPH in clinical effectiveness, so I know a lot about this program as well. So the MPH and CLE provides students with analytical and quantitative training that's necessary to evaluate the impact of clinical practices, decisions, and interventions. So that's kind of the overall goal of the MPH and clinical effectiveness. There's a lot of different areas of interest within that. So usually students are interested in at least one of, if not all of these areas. So clinical epidemiology and biostatistics, obviously, since that's a core component, cost effectiveness and decision analysis, health services research, quality improvement in healthcare. These are common areas of interest, and there are courses in all of these areas as part of the MPH and CLE. There's a couple different options for the schedule for how you could complete the MPH in clinical effectiveness. So the first option is what we call the academic year option. That basically means even though you start in the summer with the PCE, the program basically continues throughout the academic year. So you can do it full time in one academic year, which is actually a little bit less than 1 year because you start the program in July and you actually graduate in May. So that's kind of full time for one academic year. Or the academic year option can also be done part-time over 2 years. So you can kind of spread out the coursework part-time over 2 years. And that's oftentimes if you're a fellow, for example, at one of the local teaching hospitals in Boston, you might be doing this alongside a fellowship. And that's how many of our fellows do it, is they're sort of doing their fellowship and at the same time, they're doing the degree part-time over 2 years. So those are a couple options for the academic year option. There's also an option called the summer focused option, which is often done by people who are not based in the Boston area. And then you can do it essentially over either 2 or 3 summers. It used to be that it took 3 summers total, including the PCE, which is the first summer. But nowadays we do have some online courses that can be taken in between summers, even if you're in the summer focused option. So it actually is possible, if you're strategic with your planning, to do this option in 2 summers if you're really conscientious about taking online courses in between. So again, that can be done in either 2 or 3 summers if you're in the summer focused option. But with either one of those 2 options, the requirements are pretty much the same, and it's a total of 45 credits that are required. So it ends up being, again, if you've done the PCE, it's basically a third of the degree. Just to tell you a little bit more about courses that are required as part of the MPH in clinical effectiveness, as I said, the requirements are pretty much the same, regardless of whether you're academic year or whether you're the summer focused option. So in terms of the core requirements, everybody's required to take BST 206 and EPI 208, which are, again, those core courses that are part of the PCE. And then there are some what we call public health core courses that I've listed here. I won't read these off to you, but what I'll say is that these courses that I've labeled as the public health core are required for all students who are getting a master's of public health at the school. So these are courses that are outside of epidemiology and biostatistics, but obviously represent other important areas of public health that anybody who's getting a master's of public health should be exposed to. And so that's why these are required as part of the MPH in clinical effectiveness, but also as part of any other MPH program at the school. And then all students who are doing the MPH in CLE also need to do something called the Applied Practice Experience and Integrative Learning Experience. That's a mouthful. Sometimes we just call that the practicum for short. There's 2 different courses that you take to fulfill that requirement that are basically the same. It just depends on whether you're academic year or summer focused, which one you take. But either way, as part of that, you develop an applied research project and actually conduct the project. Many times that might be the same project that you developed as part of the EPI 208 course. It doesn't have to be, but quite a lot of the time it is, which is nice. And then all of that culminates in doing a final presentation in the course and writing up a final paper that's written in the form of a draft manuscript, which hopefully students then go on to publish. So it's very applied, developing and then conducting all stages of a research project. And then I just wanted to show you a bit more about specific what we call field of study requirements within the MPH CLE. So in addition to the requirements that I mentioned on the previous slide, all students who are doing a Master's of Public Health in Clinical Effectiveness have to take one regression course. There's a few different options listed here. You do get exposed to regression even in the first summer as part of the introductory courses that you take. But we do require, if you're doing an MPH and CLE, that you take really like a sort of more full semester course. And so that's why you get to choose from one of those 3 options. And then all students who are doing an MPH in clinical effectiveness also need to take 5 credits, which is usually 2 classes, but sometimes it's 1 class depending upon the course, that we call upper level CLE courses. That just means any courses that are beyond the introductory level that provide students with analytic or quantitative skills. There is a very long list of courses that actually fulfill that requirement, so there's still a lot of flexibility, but I've listed just a few of them here to give you a flavor. And then any courses beyond these requirements are really elective courses. So there actually is a lot of opportunity within the MPH clinical effectiveness to take elective courses in a variety of different areas that are outside of our requirements. Okay, so that was just very brief overview. Happy to answer more questions about that afterward, but I want to make sure we get to the more probably fun part of the session. So I'll talk just briefly here about the second degree program that I mentioned at the beginning, and then I'm going to ask our current students to introduce themselves. So the second targeted degree program is the SM, which is Masters of Science in Epidemiology, the SM EPI for short. In terms of overview and schedule for this degree program, again, this is a Master's of Science degree rather than an MPH, which is a Master of Public Health. And historically, the distinction between a Master's of Science and a Master's of Public Health is that a Master's of Science is considered to be more of a research degree versus a Master's of Public Health is considered to be a professional degree. I put those in quotes because the reality is that these days, especially with the MPH and clinical effectiveness, we have a lot of overlap, I would say, in the types of students who do these, and really a lot of overlap in the courses. But one thing I will point out that is different between the requirements for these is that because the Master's of Science it's not a Master's of Public Health, it is considered a research degree rather than a professional degree. Students who are doing a Master's of Science do not have to take those core public health courses that I listed on a couple slides ago about the MPH. So they don't have to take those courses. And sometimes that then opens up the possibility to go a little bit deeper in some methodology courses. So that is one, I would say, minor difference in the curriculum between those two degree programs. But similar to the Masters of Public Health, students who do a Masters of Science have many different interests. So there's lots of different areas of epidemiology that students who are doing the Masters of Science can focus on. I've just listed some of them here, but if you look at the website, you'll see there's actually other areas of interest as well. And there are specific courses that are pretty much within all of these areas. In terms of the schedule for how you complete the Masters of Science, for people who do the program in clinical effectiveness, there's really only one option for the Masters of Science. There are other Masters of Science degrees at the school that are a little bit different in terms of the schedule, but for students who are doing the Masters of Science in EPI, sort of as part of the, sort of following from the PCE, there's really only one schedule, and that is what we call the summer focus schedule. So that means that you complete the Masters of Science, the SM EPI, in either 2 or 3 summers, similar to what I said about the MPH for the summer focused option. It used to be that it had to be 3 summers, but these days, if you're strategic about how you plan your courses, it actually is possible to do it in 2 summers with some online courses in between. And there's slightly fewer credits that are required for the Masters of Science. It's 42.5 credits versus 45 credits for the MPH. In terms of required courses within the Masters of Science, again, EPI 208 and BST 206, which are the required core courses as part of the PCE. Those are required for this degree. And then there's a few other required courses. One is Analytical Clinical Epidemiology, which is largely a course in regression, but covers some other methods as well. There's also a Study Design and Clinical Epi course that's required. And then a thesis, which is actually fairly similar to the practicum project that students doing the MPH complete. So those are the requirements. And then really similar to MPH students, there's a large number of elective courses as well that students who are doing the Masters of Science can complete. Okay, so that was a lot. And again, happy to answer questions about anything that we've talked about when we get to that part. But I'm gonna, this is again really the fun part because I'm gonna ask, I think they are all on at this point. So we have 4 of our current students who are, well, people who did the PCE in the past who are now in our MPH and clinical effectiveness. So I'm gonna ask each one of these 4 lovely individuals to just briefly introduce themselves, just say their name, who they are, and why they did the PCE and anything brief they want to share. I'm going to ask each of them to keep it to just like 1 to 2 minutes in the interest of time. But when we get to the questions part after that, please feel free to direct questions specifically to them if you like. So I think I've put them, I think I tried to put them in alphabetical order, but may not have been 100% on because I added Jesus's, I think, middle name at the last moment. But we'll go in this order. So Sarah, I'm going to ask you to start off and then we'll follow through with the order.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Char. I am a clinical oncology fellow at Dana-Farber. I'm currently in my third year of oncology fellowship. I did the PCE in 2024, as you see on the slide. And I heard about the PCE actually through my clinical mentor who had done it in her own time, like 20 years ago. And it's quite common in my research group that a lot of folks did the PCE and then the MPH in clinical effectiveness. And that really sort of helped them build the skills that they needed to do the kind of epidemiologic and sort of clinical investigation that we do in our research group. So that's how I arrived at the PCE. And then basically shortly after or while I was in the PCE, I was like, oh, I would love to continue and do the MPH. I didn't initially apply because I wasn't sure of my funding. And so it took me some time to sort of sort that out with my mentor. But now I'm in the MPH for clinical effectiveness and will probably finish sometime around this summer. And I actually am particularly interested in like nutritional epi and obesity epi. And so I've taken some higher level courses in that subject matter just to inform the research that I do.
Great. Thanks, Sarah. Jesus, you're up next.
Perfect. So great to be with you all. Jesus Hernandez here. I'm a Mexican and American physician, movement disorders fellow, and applying to the match as well. One of the things that motivated me the most to be here is that in the past I did a PPCR that I'm very sure that many of you guys had this course, and also one of my best friends and colleagues from medical school was in this program. So right now I'm doing the Master's in Public Health, Clinical Effectiveness, full-time academic year. And right now my research focus lies on the cognitive impairment and detection on different medical minorities across the United States. And happy to answer any questions that the prospective students may have. Thank you all.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Jesus.
Yeah.
Leandra, you are next.
Hi, everyone. I'm Leandra. Nice to meet you all. Before coming to Boston, I was a postdoc at the Children's Hospital in Zurich and did clinical research there, mainly in the NICU. And for our research projects, we didn't really have any support by statisticians, so I mainly did all my analysis on my own. So I kind of tried to find a way to structurally really learn like statistics and how to build my own projects, which is why I decided to do the PCE. So I came here. I'm now postdoc at Boston Children's and doing the MPH at the same time. And I think the PC in the summer really helped me like to answer my like basic questions that I had on how to like really do my own research projects. But now if you really want to do research apart from your like clinical work, I think it really makes sense to also do the MPH because that helped me at least so far to like go very deep into like some areas. I took a few regression classes and yeah, I think it really helps you for your future research. And I think now after doing the summer course, I with Brian, I really understand what a p-value actually is. So that was very helpful. So yeah, happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Great. Thanks, Leandra. And Louisa, last but not least, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for meeting us here. I'm a pediatrician originally from Brazil, and I came to Boston to the PCE this summer, and I'm now on my MPH in clinical effectiveness as well. And I think the reason I did the PCE and the MPH later was basically the same. I wanted to understand more about research, clinical research, and to not skip the method section in the articles. So now I am in my MPH, and my research is basically on child health care, health policy, and health access to vulnerable communities as a pediatrician. So yeah, I think that's it. I'm happy to answer questions. Yeah.
Great. Thanks so much, Louisa. And as I said, we're going to get to the questions part soon, but certainly all of you should feel free to, Louisa and Sarah and Jesus and Leandra, feel free to chime in. And people who are on the session, please feel free to direct questions specifically to them as well. Okay, so we're going to wrap this formal part up quickly with just a few logistics, I would say. So if you're wondering who should apply to the PCE, what I would say is that individuals, this goes back to what we said right at the beginning about what the PCE is, but people who should apply usually are individuals who are seeking quantitative and analytic skills for either clinical, population, or health services research. And eligible applicants should be healthcare professionals of some sort, although that is really defined fairly broadly, I would say, who are holding an advanced degree of some sort, such as, and I've listed a few of them here, MD, MBBS, MBBCH, DMD, PhD, PharmD, NP, or other equivalent degrees. So this is not an exhaustive list, but gives you an idea of some of the degrees that people have completed. Certainly, if you have questions about whether you're eligible to apply, you can ask during the Q&A, or even better is probably to email us directly if you have questions about, and we'll have our contact information up at the end. Okay, so now just the last couple slides, I'm going to turn it over to Marian just to go through quickly how the logistics of the application work. So Marian, I'll turn it to you.
Thank you, Heather. So if you're applying to one of the degree programs, either the MPH-CLE or the SM-EPI, you have to complete 2 steps. You have to apply for the degree program, but also for the non-degree application. So there's one application going to be in SOFAS, that's the system that is being used by Harvard, and one application in SOFAS Express. Most materials for both these applications are the same. There's a few additional things needed for the degree application. So for the degrees, you need transcripts or mark sheets, and you also need 3 letters of reference, while the non-degree application is only 2 letters of reference. Please note, you can use the same letters of reference. You don't have to have, your reviewers have to upload them to both systems, but they don't need to be targeted differently. You target them towards your degree application, that's the most important one, but those same letters can be uploaded for the non-degree application. Also, if you are applying for the degree program, we will pay your SOFAS application fee for the SOFAS Express for your non-degree application. So if you're applying to if you're applying to the degree program, you don't have to pay both application fees. You submit your degree application in SOFAS, send us an email, and then we will give you a code to pay for your SOFAS Express application so that you don't have additional costs for this step. And you apply throughout the website. We have it down here, and we'll put those slides up as well. Please note the degree application deadline is December 1st, so it is coming up just a month from now. So then, thank you. Next slide. So the application process for the non-degree program, you have a little bit more time. It's not until February 15th. The application is in SOFAS Express. You need a statement of purpose and objectives, 2 letters of reference. The degree one is 3 letters of reference. Your curriculum vitae. You need, and this is all applicable for the degree application as well. You need an English proficiency test if applicable. So if you have not, if English is not your first language and you have not received a degree from an English speaking institution, then you need to do an English proficiency test on either of these 3 options, TOEFL, ELTS, or Duolingo, while Duolingo is, I believe, the fastest and cheapest options, just FYI. And again, there's the application fee of $60. To mention, there is no financial aid for non-degree programs. So if you apply to the degree program, you can look into financial aid, but if you're just doing the PCE as a non-degree standalone certificate, there is no financial aid available. All right, here's a few websites and contact information. So our website, the PCE website, which you probably have been on at this point. I also included the tuition and financial aid information. So if you would like to know the costs of the program or any other costs, for the degree versus non-degree, you can go on here. Please note that the numbers for next year are not set until February. So what you can look at right now is last year's numbers, but next year's numbers won't be published until about February. And then you have a few email addresses to contact us directly, the PCE program, but also the MPH, CLE, the SM-EPI program, admissions office, the registrar, and then the financial aid office if you have any questions on that.
And Marian, these slides will be circulated or posted after.
Correct.
So
we'll post
you don't have to write down all the emails.
No,
we'll make sure those are posted.
Do not write down. They will be posted under the information section on our website. All right. And then follow us on social media. You know, we update everything as we can, everything that's going on, we put on social media as well. We are both on LinkedIn as on Blue Sky, and soon possibly, you know, a little bit more active on Instagram as well. So follow us, and you will, you know, we post every week to make sure that everybody has the ability to stay in touch and know what's going on and which part we are in. And then I think we're on to questions. So feel free
Yeah.
to raise your hand, turn on your camera, put it in the chat, whatever you're most comfortable with. But use the time to, you know, get all the answers you have for our program.
Yeah, and I just stopped sharing screen so that hopefully people can see each other better. But what I know there's already been a little activity in the chat, but
And
it looks like
I'm
posting
gonna
links and things in the chat. So what I will